Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. We are back with the questions from Jurisprudence. Our first question. How has Indian law been used as a tool for social reform? Laws like the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes, that is Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, and the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 aim to uplift disadvantaged groups. Give an example of judicial reform in India promoting social change. The abolition of untouchability and the right to education are examples of judicial reforms promoting social justice. Why is sociological jurisprudence important for judicial reforms in India? It ensures that laws address social inequalities and cultural prejudices. What does legal positivism emphasize? Law is created by legitimate authorities independent of morality. How does legal realism differ from legal positivism? Legal realism focuses on how law is applied in practice rather than just its written form. What does stare decisis mean? Stare decisis is a Latin term meaning to stand by things decided. What is the doctrine of stare decisis? Stare decisis doctrine mandates that courts follow previous decisions unless there is a strong reason to depart from them. What are the types of precedents? The two types of precedents are binding precedents and persuasive precedents. What role does law play in market regulation? Law enforces contracts, protects property rights, and resolves disputes to ensure the smooth functioning of markets. Why are contract law and property law crucial for economic transactions? They reduce uncertainty, promote investments, and encourage economic stability. What is cost-benefit analysis in a legal decision-making? Cost-benefit analysis assesses the economic cost of legal rules against the benefits such as economic growth and stability. How does law shape incentives for business and individuals? By encouraging investment, innovation, and risk-taking through legal frameworks like intellectual property laws. What is a binding precedent? A binding precedent is a decision made by a higher court that lower courts are obliged to follow. What does sociological jurisprudence emphasize? Law should adapt to social needs and changing social conditions. What does CLS or critical legal studies argue about the law? Law is a tool that perpetuates social inequalities and power structures. What is a persuasive precedent? A persuasive precedent is a decision from a court of equal or lower rank that is not obligatory but may influence a decision. In which legal systems is precedent a primary source of law? Precedent is a primary source of law in common law systems like those in the UK and the USA and India. How does the Walsh-Gaze theory connect a law and a cultural identity? It suggests that laws reflect a society's traditions, morals, and a worldview shaping national identity. Why do different countries have varying legal systems according to Walsh-Gaze? Because their laws are shaped by unique historical, cultural, and social experiences. How do intellectual property laws promote innovation? By granting temporary monopolies on new inventions, providing incentives for research and development. What is legal formalism and how does the economic interpretation challenge it? Legal formalism focuses on rules in isolation, while the economic interpretation argues that laws should consider their economic and societal effects. Which movement is associated with the economic interpretation of law? The law and the economics movement. Who is a key scholar associated with the law and the economics movement? Richard Posner. How does Walsh-Gaze explain the dynamic nature of law? Since culture evolves, law must also adapt to changing social, economic, and historical conditions. What is a major criticism of the Walsh-Gaze theory? It may lead to conservatism, resisting legal reforms, and a progressive change. What is classical naturalism? Classical naturalism is a theory that a law is based on universal moral principles inherent in human nature. What is the basis of classical natural law? A moral order that applies to all humans, discoverable through reason. How can Walsh-Gaze lead to exclusion or marginalization? By emphasizing a homogeneous national culture, it may overlook a minority groups within society. What role does law play in shaping national identity? It defines societal norms, fostering a sense of belonging and a social cohesion. How does Walsh-Gaze influence legal interpretation? Judges may interpret laws based on historical and cultural context rather than universal principles. What challenges does India face in implementing laws? Bureaucratic inefficiencies, corruption, and a lack of public awareness hinder legal implementation. How does the economic interpretation view property rights in economic development? Secure property rights reduce disputes and encourage investment, leading to economic growth. Can the economic interpretation of law address social justice concerns? Yes, it can be used to design legal rules that promote wealth equally and access to resources for disadvantaged groups. What is the major criticism of the economic interpretation of law? It may prioritize efficiency over moral and ethical concerns, potentially increasing inequality. What are some persistent societal inequalities in India? Caste-based discrimination, gender inequality, and religious intolerance continue to exist despite legal reforms. Why are legal reforms alone insufficient to solve social issues? Broader social changes are required alongside legal reforms to address deep-rooted inequalities. According to classical naturalism, when is a law unjust? When it does not align with the moral principles. Which two philosophers are key figures in classical natural law theory? Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas. What did Aristotle believe about the law? It should aim at promoting the good life. How did Thomas Aquinas expand natural law theory? By stating that human law must align with a divine law and a natural reason. How can courts modify precedents? Courts can overrule previous decisions if they believe they are unjust or outdated. Give an example of a landmark case that influenced the precedents in India. The Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala case, which upheld the basic structure doctrine. What is a custom in legal terms? A custom is an established practice or tradition followed by a community over a long period and treated as binding. How does Walsgeist relate to modern jurisprudence? While its direct influence has declined, Walsgeist still affects legal pluralism and cultural considerations in law. What is synthetic jurisprudence? Synthetic jurisprudence is a legal theory that integrates elements from different schools of thought to create a more comprehensive understanding of law. How does synthetic jurisprudence bridge the gap between analytical and normative approaches? It combines the descriptive, that is what law is, and a prescriptive, that is what law should be, aspects of legal theory. How does synthetic jurisprudence differ from legal positivism and natural law theory? Synthetic jurisprudence acknowledges both the formal structure of law, that is legal positivism, and its moral purpose, that is natural law theory. Why is law considered a dynamic institution in a synthetic jurisprudence? Because it evolves with societal needs, values, and it changes. What does synthetic jurisprudence emphasize about a law's role in society? That a law should be both socially relevant and morally just. What challenge does the Walsgeist theory pose to universal legal principles? It argues that law is inherently linked to our nation's lived experience rather than being abstract or universal.